Okay, so today I wanted to do a book haul or a book call 14, 15, 16 books by Black African American authors that I feel is essential for us to read, especially in the Black community. Okay, so the first book that I'm going to give y'all is by one of my heroes, Mr. Malcolm X, and this book is called The Autobiography of Malcolm X. I feel like this book is extremely vital for us to read, especially in my community, because we always hear about MLK and Rosa Parks and always hear about the integration and becoming a part of a society that always seen us as inhumane, and we see how basically the system was only just redesigned and we're still in a state of havoc and in the state of oppression within our community. But we never hear about the stories of Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey and how they was basically telling us that us as a Black community should stick as a Black community and create our own, so we don't have to depend on that and don't have to basically write off the backs of those people who see us as subhuman and subjected us and didn't, want the best for us, you know what I mean? And he also wanted to teach about, self-love and learning the history of your people, to know who you are so you can know where to go, and to see the value in who you are. You don't need that inclusion. You don't need to be a part of that. We can create that in our own little area. And so many other things he taught. But that's the only, I don't want to give you too much. I didn't really read too much of the book yet. And plus, this is just the books that I recommend. This is not a book review. I'll give you a book review on this later. And yeah, so this book is very essential. I feel like everyone should read it, especially everyone in our community. You get a dose of strength from this book, resilience, and inspiration and motivation, honestly. So this is a very important book. That's all I'm saying. I want to say so much about the things that he taught and going so much into depth, but I'm just waiting till I do the book review. I don't want to blabber on too much and let this video run so long, so let's just pass that to the left. So the next book is a little book I'm still reading. I got like 100 pages left. It's Spectacle Uta Benja. And this book is by a lady called Pamela Newkirk. And the astonishing life of Uta Benja is basically a story about how they took this little boy, well, he was like a teenager from Africa, and they basically brought him up to a New York zoo, I think it was the Bronx, and they put him on display with the monkeys, and he was basically treated like an animal. They would feed him, things that, animals would eat, and they would basically call him a carnivore and basically lie about what he was and what he represented. And they did that. They didn't just do that in the Bronx, but based off of seeing what he did, they characterized every African and Black person like that, like how they represented him in this book. And this book made me a little mad. The way, not only just the way that they treated him, and you even get to hear some of his words, and one of the sentences that he stated in this book was how he didn't like America and he wanted to go back home. Because some of the guys in this book traveled to Africa, and it was just genocide after genocide, killings of Black Africans for absolutely no reason. And then they would call these people lazy, but they were the ones sitting on their backs, riding their backs to get to their destination. And they were basically parading about how the Africans were inferior and how they were superior to the Africans. And a little in this book, which is funny, was the fact that the people who are of a lighter tone, like the Black people who are of a lighter tone, we already know this, but it was funny in this book because it reminded me of the Willie Lynch letter, was that they were better than the darker skin because they were a mixture of white and Black. And it's nothing brand new, but it's kind of funny that it was in this book, and then that just, reminded me of that, because this is the first time I actually read it from a person's perspective that was there during that time. Besides, it was this other movie, but that's, besides the point that I heard that at. But I'm talking about like one of the white people, basically. But I feel like this book is very important too. You know, it wasn't just him that was in the circus. It was a lot of other Africans that they would bring into the circus and parade around, and they would chase him around the zoo when he would get loose and stuff like that, and just treat him like an animal. That's what they did to him. They treated him like an animal. So pick this up. You might be mad when you read it. I'm gonna show y'all one of the pictures, and then I'm gonna move on. But I think it's in one of these cracks. I'm not really... Oh, here it is. This was him right here. This was him. They did his teeth like that to make him seem more animalistic and carnivore-ish, because that's what they painted him as, a carnivore. But I recommend this book too because it teaches you the fact that it wasn't just, because people think slavery, for some reason, a lot of, especially white people, think slavery was just working on a field and stuff like this. And this is past slavery, so this also tells you that it was deeper and it prolonged after slavery supposedly ended. You know, they were still treating us like dogs, and how we also went through things like, if you search up pig codes, pig laws, black code, and after slavery, it was the sharecropping, and then black code, pig laws, and, you know, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and all that stuff was going on. Not integration, but mass incarceration and stuff like that. But this digs into like those times where I also heard about how they would throw our babies to the alligators. And it's a lot of pictures online of our people in zoos and how they would just, you know, treat them like animals and stuff like that. And it's crazy. This book is crazy. But this one is highly recommended too. Another book that I would recommend is Visions for Black Men. I just read the first chapter. I'm not really into it, but it's From Maleness to Malehood, and it talks about let me see what it talks about, because I honestly don't remember. But it goes into depth about the economic, educational, psychological, political, and military assault on black lives and different things like that. And I'm gonna just tell y'all the chapters, because I only read a couple. I haven't read this book in a minute, but based off of what I read and what I remember, like the effect it had on me when I read it, that's why I recommend this. But From Maleness to Malehood, Transcending Images of Black Malehood, that to me speaks for itself. Exodus into Manhood and Defining Malehood. But I think this book would be essential. It's by Naeem Akbar, Visions of a Black Male. And I got this from Mood Market. I forgot where the plaza it was at, but it's in Rochester. But if you look it up, you'll probably find it. But I feel like this book is very essential too. I'll do a book review when I get done reading this, so I can go more into depth about it. So y'all could probably be more, fixated into buying the book and checking it out. But yeah, that's one of them. Another book that I would recommend is, this is a history book that I got from college, African Americans, Kansai history. I think that's how you say it. But I got this from college. This is my uncle. He was a professor in college. And obviously I kept the book. He let me keep the book. I didn't have to buy it. But it basically talks about the history of Africans and the story from Egypt until today's time. Let me see how far it goes, because I don't remember. Oh, it goes into the 1980s to present. It goes into depth about the different things that were stolen from us, like our culture, our history, our instruments, our language, our religion, traditions, like from cooking food to how you treat your children and different things like that. The things that our people invented, the things that were stolen from our people, slavery, obviously, the black code, pig codes, and the separation of our people in different methods. It goes into depth about that with this book. This book honestly has everything included with these books that I'm about to talk about, but basically about the African American struggle. Not like 100% everything, but I would say like 98% everything. I would say based off of just what I read. I did from the Egypt to slavery. They don't have every single detail in the book, but it gives you pieces. So maybe you could like, okay, I want to learn more about this, search it up, find a book about that, and go more into depth. But this book goes into depth about a lot of different subjects. But those things that I mentioned before, that's what I read. And it also goes into the African that like before they were put on the slave ships, what they had to endure, like the seasonings and the capture the sea and the dungeon and stuff like that before they got on the ship, and then after they got on the ship. So they went through mental trauma before they even got on the ship. The same African that was in Africa wasn't the same African that came to the United States. And I feel like a lot of people need to know that. Like the mentality and the mentality shifted even just being on them boats, enduring what they endured and seeing what they had to see and the loss of so many lives upon that ship even before they even sailed off. So I feel like this book is extremely important, and it's honestly, I don't want to say entertaining, but I mean, if you want to learn about your history, I would get this book, honestly. This is probably, I don't want to say the highly recommended one, but I will put this at the top of my list. So, yeah. The only reason why I'm putting this in here is because I feel it is essential to read. This is not, I don't want to ill-educate anybody, but the Willie Lynch letter is not a real letter, but the things inside of the letter did happen, and I would say it's coming from different people's perspectives that were probably living during that time and maybe a little bit after. But the Willie Lynch letter and the making of a slave, I think the making of a slave is true. I read that part. They talk about the marriage unit and the separation of, like I said in this book, the previous book, separation of our people to basically divide us and break us apart from unifying and coming together and learning our true remembering who we are and breaking that unit apart. But I feel like it's a little read. It's not something that I will say, oh my God, you gotta get this. But I feel like this is a little essential to read because it does tell you about the different methods they use. And it's not a real letter, but I feel like the story and the stuff is real. Like the separation and stuff did happen. So I feel like this is important to read. But it being something that they sat down and structured, nah, that didn't happen. But the things in this book are real, like the strategies they use. They didn't have to sit down and create strategies. They probably could have just did that, freely and openly and stuff like that. So, they were, I don't want to say smart, but they knew what they were doing. So, if you want to, this is if you want to. The next book is Tupac Shakur, The Rose That Grew from Concrete. Poetry in this basically is his poetry. I would say he was like 17 or a little bit younger than that. I would say he was in high school and he wrote these poems, but from a black revolutionary, Mr. Tupac Shakur. I got so many books of him that I would recommend. I would just recommend every book that is based on this man because you will learn a lot about not just him, but learn a lot about the world in general, because he was extremely smart and his perspectives were very bright and they were very like, oh, okay, they were easy to obtain and easy to understand, and his passion just grabs you and it just makes you want to go out and make a difference. And he was a very powerful poet, and he read I think it was over 60 books within his life. I would say probably more than 60 books within his life, because the books that he read that was in the 60s, this was when he was from high school to college or something like that, because I remember Layla Steinberg, I think that was her name, she put a list online of the books that her and Tupac read together. And yeah, that's what I want to say about that. But I feel like this is important to read, especially for black literature. A little Tupac for you. Yeah. Okay, so this next book that I would like to give you is by Lynn Harris, and it's called Invisible Life. And it basically touches on black male sexuality. It's about this black male, how in college he basically came out to himself and figured out what his real sexual identity was, and how he hid that from his family, and because he didn't know how they would react, because he knew how they would react and how they probably wouldn't accept him for that, and how he mentally went through so many things and almost committed suicide, and how he would have these different relationships with men, and he would think it would just be just for sex, but then he realized it was, he really liked these men, like he was really, gay. But he couldn't even accept that for himself until like later on into the book. But this book, if you ever watch Noah's Ark, it has that same ambiance. It gives you that same feel. It leaves you wanting more. This book is extremely important because it, like I said, it explores itself. It was during the 90s, and during that period of time, of course, that wasn't being accepted. And, they had gay clubs and stuff, but this also was a time where AIDS was very rampant, and explores that in this book also. So I feel like that's very important to touch on. And it's basically an awareness book. I did a review on this, so if you want to know more about the book, the review is in one of my playlists, so you can check that out. It'll be in the description below, but I recommend this book highly, Invisible Life. This next book that I would like to show you is Selected Poems by Langston Hughes. I love Langston Hughes. And I feel like this is important because, like Nina Simone said, the artist should reflect the times that they are in. And I feel like he's one of those artists that reflected the times that he lived in. During the 60s and 50s and stuff like that. Different things obviously were going on, the civil rights movement and segregation and Jim Crow. And he explores a lot of that in this book. Stories of his mother, the angst she went through, and the worrisome attitudes, and it's a lot of different stories in here. It's not just exploring that. But another favorite was Theme for English B, and it was another one that I loved in this book. I forgot what it was called, and I'm upset because but honestly, it's like he was telling people's stories, like even from slavery, freedom train, and he talked about Africa. And A Dream Deferred, that's the one I want. A Dream Deferred, that's one of my favorites too. But I recommend this highly. Black literature. I remember Moesha on her show, she used to always talk about Langston Hughes and recite some of his poetry. And he was one of the amazing black literature, African American literature poets that came out during that time. And I feel like it's important to touch up on some of his stuff because it relates to current issues, and it just brings you more into that time and how artists reflected that time through their work. So that's why I feel like this book is extremely important. And not only that, but he is one of the most important people within our people, and even just in general literature. Next book that I would like to explore and give to you is The Teachings of Tahoe'S, the oldest book in the world. I did a review on this, so you can look for the review. It's going to be in the description below to get more in depth about this book. But obviously, it was based on Egyptian philosophy. And I'm going to just read something from here. It says, clearly the restoration of these writings destroyed forever the myth of Africa that was created by greedy colonizers to justify their wanton destruction of African culture competitors, the capture of their national wealth, and the wealth of their intellectual legacy as well. Basically, this book destroyed the myth of Africa always being a poor country, and how it was just nothing. It was just, oh, okay, here goes this country that's just here, it's no history, no story to it, no strength to it, no character to it, no nothing to it. But in reality, that's where we all derive from. And it has its richest history, and where the creators and the inventors were birthed, obviously. But I also love this because it reminds me of the Ten Commandments for some reason. And it gives you like things that you can pass down to the next generation. And it said, reasons for living a long life, following his ancestors' words, and to achieve and honor them in their words. So basically, taking what they taught to you and applying that to your life, and just pushing that on to further generations, basically. Listen, if you